Ware Motorsports reveals their 2025 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series driver lineup. LaJoie officially announced his 2025 NASCAR plans, and NASCAR will not change the playoff format in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. First, to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2025 Motorcraft throwback scheme that we'll see at the Cookout Clash. This looks really incredible. Wood Brothers absolutely knocked this one out of the park. It looks very simpler. It's got an old school look. I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Bowman Gray. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Christopher Bell's 2025 Mobile 1 scheme that we'll see in quite a few races in 2025. This is better than last year's scheme, and I said the 2024 scheme was really good. This one's better. The wide number looks really good on this car. The colors look fantastic. JGR did a really good job utilizing the sponsorship placement among other things. It looks really great. We're looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Dye's 2025 Black Widow scheme that we'll see at Talladega and a couple of the races throughout the 2025 season. This scheme, I believe, did run in 2024 where Daniel Dye ran part-time in the NASCAR XFINITY series. I think they did a really good job on this one. It looks really solid, and Colin did a good job on this paint scheme. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Williams' 2025 Alloy Employer scheme that we'll see in a majority of races in 2025. There's not many changes from 2024. It does look really solid. I thought last year's scheme did look really good. It also kind of looks similar to when he drove for DGM Racing a couple years ago. And I think that Colin did a pretty good job on this paint scheme, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Rockingham XFINITY Series race, as it has a new title sponsor. The race is going to be called the North Carolina Education Lottery 250. A really solid name. I believe the truck series is going to be called the North Carolina Education Lottery 200. So both are going to have the same name for this event. Actually, I think it's Black Tire 200 for the NASCAR Truck Series racer, so I'm wrong on that. But I think it's really cool, the North Carolina Education Lottery, which of course will sponsor, like I said, the Craftsman Truck Series at Charlotte later this year. I think it's good to see the North Carolina Education Lottery will sponsor them in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about truck laps. As it was reported by Chris Knight from CatchFence.com, there's been some changes to how many laps each of these races will be for the truck series in 2025. For the Pocono race that will happen in June, the laps have increased from around 70 to 75 laps up to 80 laps for the event, going to a 200-mile race at Pocono for the truck series. Meanwhile, the Bristol Night or the spring race will go from 200 laps up to 250. Beginning with the Pocono race, increase in 80 laps. I think the start times have moved up a little bit earlier as well for the event, so they should have enough daylight to get in. I think it's a move that did make sense, all things considered. And as for the Bristol race, moving around as well and increasing how many laps that one's going to be, yeah, I'm thumbs up for that. I think that's a really solid decision to go ahead and increase that one. I think 200 laps for the truck series of Bristol was way too short in my opinion, so going up from 200 to 250 laps is really the best decision you can make in this situation. Overall, I do like these increases, and I think they did a really good job going ahead and getting some more increase in some of these laps. I think it needed more laps at Bristol, especially in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're unfortunately taking this episode to our note. As it was sadly announced and confirmed early this evening that Bill Weber has sadly passed away at the age of 67 years old. Bill Weber, for those who were not around many years ago, he was a pit reporter for ESPN in the 1990s and also in the early 2000s was a reporter for NBC, and in the mid to late 2000s he was a commentator for NBC and TNT. Bill Weber left the sport around 2009, but he left an impact in some way, shape, or form as someone in the sport. He did a really good job covering the pre-race show for many years, and it's just a really sad day to see another icon of the 2000s no longer around. My thoughts and condolences do go out to the Weber family during this time. Bill Weber was sadly 67 years old. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about some Cup owner point transfers. As it was reported by Bob Pockers earlier today, there's been some changes to the owner's points for drivers in teams in 2025. First, the 4 car that Stewart-Haas Racing had in 2025, those owners' points are being transferred to the 4 Front Row Motorsports car for 2025. 14 car that Stewart-Haas Racing had last year will transfer over to the 88 car for Trackhouse Racing and Shane Van Gisbergen, as that 14 charter went over to Trackhouse Racing this year. For the 10 SA charter, that is going over to Riley Herbst in the 35 car for 2311 Racing. For the 15 car for Rick Ware from last year, that charter, no surprise, will go to the 60 RFK Racing machine for Ryan Preece. And finally, a 31 is just transferring over to the number 10, and the 41 car that Stewart-Haas Racing had last year will transfer over to the 41 Haas Factory Team car for 2025. Overall, none of these are really shocking and surprising. This is basically what the charter transfers were for 2025. We know which charters from Stewart-Haas Racing went to which ones. I think it's not a bad decision to go ahead and announce that, and I think they've got some solid numbers, and it's good to see that we've got the owners' points transfers for 2025, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Samsung. As it was reported by Jeff Gluck earlier today, that NASCAR will be using the wall screens that Samsung has for its new remote officiating center at the productions facility at the R&D Production Center that will be used for broadcast as well. Obviously, we know that NASCAR was going to be doing a lot of different things at the new R&D Production Center that they're going to be utilizing in 2025 for a lot of their shows, including on Tubi, and there could also be some remote broadcasts as well. This, I feel like, is going to be very similar to how they do it in the MLB, where they have a team over in New York that will do reviews when it comes to plays, especially if we have any officiating issues. That group will be able to help in a pretty big way. I still think there is going to be a really big team that is at the racetrack helping out, which that really needs to happen because you need to have an officiating team down there on the ground making decisions, but I don't think it's a bad decision to utilize the tools that you have. I don't think this is a bad change overall, all things considered. It's not that shocking, to be honest, they're doing this, and I think using some sort of tools that you have to get a group over there to work does make a lot of sense. I understand why some fans won't agree with that, but I do think that having some sort of system like that to go ahead and try to make some officiating rulings, I don't think that's bad, all things considered. I don't think it's a wrong decision to go with that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Triple Truck Challenge. As it was announced earlier today, the Triple Truck Challenge races have been officially revealed for 2025. The 3 races will be at Martinsville in the spring, Bristol in the spring, and Rockingham in the spring. 3 short tracks on the schedule. Technically, Rockingham is a 1-mile track, but 3 shorter oval tracks will be the Triple Truck Challenge races for 2025. I think these are really good, solid tracks, all things considered. Now, the one thing that has changed for 2025 is Cup Series drivers are now allowed to run the Triple Truck Challenge races and the Dash for Cash races this year. And you don't have to be a full-time driver in the series, in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, or declare for Xfinity Series points or truck points, I should say, to be eligible to run in the event. Honestly, I really don't care about that change, but I think the tracks that the Triple Truck Challenge has decided to go with are not bad tracks to go with, in my opinion. I'm glad the Triple Truck Challenge is coming back. If you win 50, I think you win 1 race, you get $25,000. If you win 2 races, like $100,000, I believe, and you win 3 races, you win yourself a good old $500,000. So I think it's solid they're bringing that back in 2025, and I think the choice of tracks they've got for this year are pretty solid, all things considered, in my honest opinion. I do like the tracks they've decided to choose for this year. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Dash for Cash, as they have also revealed their races for 2025. So it was announced today that Las Vegas is going to be the qualifier. The top 4 finishers that are eligible for the Dash for Cash will then go to Homestead Miami Speedway, which that race, of course, is moved earlier in the year. In 2025, the 4 races for the Dash for Cash officially are going to be Homestead, Martinsville, Bristol, and Rockingham. Now, like I mentioned with the Triple Truck Challenge, Cup drivers are eligible to run, but they will not be able to receive any of the prize money that they get for the Dash for Cash, meaning that I think the second highest finisher might be able to get that, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's a good thing overall. Again, Dash for Cash has been something that's been around for 15 years at this point. I think they started doing it back in 2009 or 2010, and it's been a massive success for a very, very long time. Some are going to say it's a gimmick, but personally, if it's a gimmick, then it's not a bad gimmick. I think having the Dash for Cash to give teams $100,000 to go out there and win, it does work. I think having Cup drivers running it, I go back to the Rockingham stuff. We know there's some Cup guys that do want to run the Rockingham NASCAR event. They're going to be doing the test tomorrow for Xfinity, or actually today as you're watching this, but I do think that having the Dash Dasher Cash go along here does make a lot of sense for some Cup guys to run, and I think it's going to create that intrigue and excitement, and I think you'll see some pretty big names that do decide to go ahead and show up at the events. They have for the Dasher Cash, though maybe we won't see many changes on that front, but I do think it's not a bad tracks to go to. I think you've got 4 solid tracks for the main Dasher Cash event, and you've also got some really good opportunities to see some Cup drivers run those races in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Young's Motorsports. As it was announced earlier this evening that Young's Motorsports has officially announced their 2025 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series lineup. Starting off with the 02 truck, they will have 2 trucks for the 2025 season. The first one will be the 02 truck, and Nathan Bird is going to drive majority races in that 02 truck in 2025. Currently, it's listed he'll run 15 races in that truck, including the season opening race at Daytona International Speedway. The number 20 truck, which I believe this will be full-time, will be driven by Stephen Parsons. Let's start off with Nathan Bird. That name is going to sound a little bit familiar because Nathan Bird is a son of Jonathan Bird, who owns a team in USAC and also has attempted and has made the Indianapolis 500 as a car owner with drivers like James Davison behind the wheel. Nathan made select starts last year in the NASCAR XFINITY and also made starts in trucks as well for Young's Motorsports and had some decent runs with the team, but did struggle a little bit. So I'm not sure how Nathan's going to do with the program in 2025, but I do think it's a really good opportunity to see what Nathan can do with the Young's Motorsports team and organization in the 2025 year. As for Stephen Parsons, it's a really good decision to put him behind the wheel full-time. Stephen is a very underrated driver. Last year, he had some pretty decent runs with Henderson Motorsports, along with doing his job as spotting for Corey LaJoie and Justin Haley throughout the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. I do think that both drivers have really great opportunities here. I do think you're going to see some other drivers get behind the wheel of the 02 truck. It wouldn't rule out the possibility of like a Kaz Gralla getting behind the wheel of that 0 truck at some point this year, but I do think they've got 2 really good young drivers they can really use for 2025. I think Stephen could get some top 20s in that truck. Young's has struggled over the last couple years. They put a lot of focus on their Xfinity Series program, which Anthony Alfredo is going to be the driver of that car this year, but I do think the lineup for Young's is solid, all things considered, and I do like the lineups they do have for 2025, as I think they've got a good, young, and very core lineup that I think has a lot of promise and a lot of potential going into the 2025 NASCAR year and season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As it was announced earlier this evening, the Spire Motorsports has officially announced their 2025 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series crew chief lineup. So for the 07 truck, which will be a part-time truck for Spire Motorsports in 2025, Alan Hart will be the crew chief of the 07. For the number 7 truck, it will once again be Brian Patty. For the 71 truck, it will be Bonio Kevin Mannion. And for the 77 truck, Chad Walter is going to be the crew chief. Starting off with Alan Hart. Alan Hart, for the last couple years, I believe, has been with Sam Hunt Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for the 26 car. And I previously was a major engineer for Justin Allgaier in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Junior Motorsports for nearly a decade. So Alan does have a lot of experience being on the pit box, and I think Alan will do a really good job as a part-time crew chief in 2025. Brian Patty coming back, not a shocking surprise. We knew he'd likely be back with this team. Brian Patty got the crew chief for Clint Boyer at Nashville, which Clint Boyer did struggle a little bit at Nashville Super Speedway, and got the crew chief for guys like Kyle Busch, Sammy Smith, who I do expect both those guys to be back, and Michael McDowell as well could be part of that program, along with maybe Carson Hocevar as well. Let's move on to Bono Manning. Basically, Bono Manning last year was a crew chief for Nick Sanchez. Nick Sanchez, of course, we know will be moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series full-time with Big Machine Racing. Bono Manning needed to go with someone who has a lot of promise and potential, and I think Raj is that guy who has a lot of potential, but he didn't, and I'm not saying this against Chad Walter or anything, but I think Kevin Bono Manning, who has won championships in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and Martin Truex Jr. has won cup races with Jamie McMurray, I think Kevin Bono Manning is going to do a relatively good job with this team in 2025. And then Chad Walter. Chad Walter, I think, has been kind of an underrated crew chief over the years. I think he'll do a pretty good job with Andres Perez. I think Andres does have a lot of talent, and he does have potential. And I think that Chad Walter is someone that could realize that potential and really make him a good driver going into the 2025 season. So overall, I think the lineup for Spire going into this year is pretty good, all things considered. And we'll see how all 4 crew chiefs can do with the 4 drivers and the 4 teams they have for the 2025 Craftsman Truck season. And now we're going ahead to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Rookie of the Year honors. As there was a very earlier today that the Rookie of the Year eligible drivers have been revealed for 2025. For the Cup Series, there's only going to be 2 rookies this year. Shane Van Gisbergen will drive the number 88 Trackhouse Racing Chevrolet, and Riley Herbst will drive the 35 car for 2311 Racing. For Xfinity, it will be guys like Carson Quaffel, Connor Zilisch, William Sawalich, Taylor Gray, Christian Eckes, Daniel Dye, Nick Sanchez, and Dean Thompson. The most drivers going for the rookie honors, I believe, since 2018. And for the Craftsman Truck Series, it will be Tony Breidinger, Andres Perez into 77, Connor Mosak at the 81 for McAnally Hilgeman, Christian Rose into 44 for Nice, and Frankie Muniz will drive the 33 truck for Rayan Brothers. Let's start off with the Cup Series. The driver thinks going to win the Cup Rookie of the Year is going to be none other than Shane Van Gisbergen. I think SVG is going to win it pretty easily. I think Riley Herbst will show some promise and potential this year, but I think at the end of the day, because Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be in the better car, and I think he'll win a few races and make the playoffs, and I don't think Riley's going to make it, so I think SVG wins the Rookie of the Year for the NASCAR Cup Series. For Xfinity, very stacked this year. I look for Carson Quaffel, Connor Zilisch to be the 2 clear favorites to win. Taylor Gray is going to be a sleeper pick because he's working with Jason Ratcliffe, who's one of the best crew chiefs in Xfinity Series history. He's the winningest crew chief ever in that series, so I think he's a sleeper pick. And I watch out for Christian Eckes too, because Eckes, if they call it and get their stuff together, I think he's got a really good opportunity. I'm going to pick Connor Zilisch, Joe, because Connor Zilisch has got a lot of road courses, and I think he's the favorite also to not only win Rookie of the Year, but win the championship in 2025. And finally, for the Truck Series, I'm giving it to Andres Perez. As much as I like Tony Breidinger as a person, she's not the best race car driver in the world, so I think she's going to struggle a bit this year. Connor Mosak's the only one I really think is going to take anything against Andres Perez, because I think he has a chance to win some road course race in 2025, but that's really it at this point. Rose, don't see him really doing much. And Frankie Muniz, as much as I like Frankie, he's in Rayum equipment. I don't expect much. So I think my rookie predictions are SVG and Cup, Connor Zilisch and Xfinity, and I have Andres Perez winning a truck. So I think Chevrolet will sweep the Rookie of the Year honor winners in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Nice Motorsports. As it was announced earlier today that Nice Motorsports has officially announced that they will be having the 41 truck make a comeback in 2025. This truck will only run on a part-time basis in 2025. They will have 3 drivers behind the wheel of that truck for the 2025 season. They'll be Matt Gold, Ross Chastain, and Bailey Curry. Matt Gold is the son of Phil Gould, who will be the crew chief for Caden Honeycutt in the NASCAR Xfinity Truck Series in 2025 in the 45 truck. Matt had a couple starts last year with Nice Motorsports and honestly did a really solid job. All things considered, I do think Matt Gold does have a lot of potential, and I think he could do a solid job in the 41 truck this year. Ross Chastain won a truck race last year at Darlington. He's won a lot of races for Nice Motorsports over the course of the last couple years. All of his truck wins have come with that program, so I expect Ross Chastain to be a major threat and serious contender to go and win some races in that 41 truck this year, because I think Nice will be a little bit better in 2025 than they were in 2024. And as for Bailey Curry, I am disappointed to see that he's not going to be full-time in truck competition in 2025. They chose Christian Rose over him because Christian Rose brought a little bit more money than, unfortunately, Bailey Curry had. Bailey, yes, had a really disappointing year in 2024. There's no denying that, but I think Bailey Curry, like I said, is a more talented driver than Christian Rose is. But I'm at least glad to see that he's not leaving the team this year, and at least will have a part-time opportunity with them in 2025. And I'm glad to see they've got 3 good drivers behind the wheel. I think Ross will be the only guy that will probably go to victory lane with them, but I do think Bailey Curry will do a solid job with the team this year. And overall, I do think this is a really solid lineup for the 41 truck in 2025. I don't remember if they announced the crew chief earlier today or not, but I do think they've got a solid lineup for the 41 truck heading into the 2025 season. We'll see how this truck can perform throughout the 2025 Craftsman Truck Series season. We'll see how things go for Nice Motorsports this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about some updated rule changes for 2025. There were some other rule changes that are announced today we're going to talk about in their own separate stories, but there are 4 notable things that were revealed that I'm not going to talk about in separate stories. Beginning with the DVP. Drivers, when their cars do get towed to the garage, drivers will be allowed to get out of the car if the car is in the garage, if the car is not out of the race. Now, if the car is officially out of the race, the driver will be told to go to the care center. If the car is towed back to the garage and officially out of the race, they will basically be told that they have to go to the infield care center. If the car is not officially out of the race and you do go back to the garage, the good news is you can get out of the car, and the good news is that you don't have to go straight to the infield care center if something happens there. Another big thing that was revealed is that there is going to be more practice taking place at Phoenix in the spring. Remember, NASCAR will be bringing an option tire out to the racetrack for the race. If the option tire works very, very well at Phoenix for the Cup Series race in the spring, there's a very likely chance that they could use that tire in the championship race at Phoenix. So giving the teams more practice, an extra hour is a really great decision, and I think it's good they're going to go ahead and do that. Continuing on, it was also revealed today that Jason Burdett will become the person that will oversee technical inspection for the Xfinity Series in 2025. Eric Peterson had been the one that had been overseeing that, but he's been taken over as race director for Xfinity after Wayne Otten just retired this past year. So Jason Burdett, who was a crew chief for Legacy Motor Club at points last year, and also crew chief at the end of the year for Tricon Garage, someone who has a lot of experience, won races as a crew chief. He's going to know what he's doing. I think he'll do a really good job overseeing technical inspection this upcoming year. As for Austin Dillon, there were some questions surrounding the fact about whether his All-Star win was going to count. His win, of course, at Richmond was going to count after he dumped Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin at the end of the race. That win will count toward eligibility. He is eligible to run the All-Star race, so Austin Dillon will not have to go through the Open. He will be guaranteed in the event. One thing about the Nemechek policy as well that I didn't talk about is the DVP is only coming in the NASCAR Cup Series this year. Xfinity trucks are still going to have the same DVP rules in 2025. I think DVP should be across the board in all three series, but what do I know at this point? Honestly, I think some of the changes are good here, and I think they've provided some other ones. There were some other things in NASCAR, but I don't have the time to talk about that at this point, so we'll see what happens in regards to that and see how things end up working with some of the rule changes, but overall, I think some of the rule changes they've added for this year are pretty good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Truck Series. As it was reported by Chris Knight from the CatchFence.com network that NASCAR is expecting around 40 to 41 entries this year at Daytona International Speedway for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. 36 drivers will be guaranteed a spot in the Truck Series race at Daytona International Speedway. They haven't officially announced how many entries will be locked in, but I don't expect anything to change from 2024. And I think having 40 to 41 trucks out there is good, but it's a little bit less than we've seen in prior years. I think a big reason for that is because some of the rule changes that came in. We talked about the fact that there were some new rules in regards, I believe, to paint, I'm pretty sure, at the end of last year that really, unfortunately, did end up affecting some teams, and some teams are not showing up to a lot of races because of that in 2025. There are a few teams that have not announced their plans in the Craftsman Truck Series at this point. Most teams have announced their plans. We do think the 41 truck, of course, will be back this year in Craftsman Truck Series competition at track. We also know, of course, Spire's lineup and all that stuff throughout the year, but we don't officially know what Motorsports lineup is going to be for the year, even though we are expecting most of the same drivers, and it seems like maybe Connor Jones might actually be back after all with Motorsport, which is a little bit disappointing, but I'm glad to see there are going to be a lot of drivers that are showing up to the Truck Series race at Daytona, because the more competition you can have, the better. There are going to be a few really solid trucks, actually probably a few really slow trucks that won't make the event this time around, but I think there is a solid lineup this year, and all things considered, good competition is the most important thing. Glad to see we're going to have around 40-41 entries that are going to show up to the NASCAR Craftsman Series Truck Series event. I think it's a great decision to go ahead and have more trucks show up. I would love to see 45 or 50 trucks show up like it did years ago. I think Xfinity's going to have around 45 to 50 cars showing up this year probably, because there's like 45 already announced for the year at this point. So it's good to see that at least more trucks could potentially show up down the road. But as of right now, there's 40-41 to have been officially confirmed to be expected to be in the Truck Series in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Zone. As it was confirmed earlier this afternoon in a post from NASCAR and Richard Childress Racing and Kyle Busch themselves, that Zone will be returning to sponsor Richard Childress Racing in 2025 and Kyle Busch. A little bit earlier this past week, I did a sponsor silly season update, and we had heard some rumblings that Zone may not be back with RCR in 2025 because they were not listed on Kyle Busch's Rebel Bourbon seat and jacket as well. But now it's good to see the Zone will be back. This is one of the two sponsors that we had thought was not going to be back at Richard Childress Racing for the 2025 season. Zone sponsored Kyle Busch for a ton of races in 2024, including the Daytona 500, and Kyle Busch almost won the Daytona 500 with this paint scheme. I did see the car in the background of Taylor Kitchen's post that she put up very recently, which she did an interview recently with Kyle Busch, and I did see in the background the 8 Zone car, and I gotta say, it does look really, really good in my opinion. It looks very similar to last year year's car, but honestly, you really didn't need to make any changes to that. Kyle Busch also did pick up some new sponsors. It seems like for 2025, Cenex is expected to sponsor Kyle Busch for this upcoming season. And I also did see the fact that some other companies may be joining Kyle Busch down the road. A former sponsor of his, we all thought M&M's might be coming back to NASCAR, but that's not happening. Todd Gillen did clear that up, and there was some talk about that, especially on YouTube here. But I'm glad to see that Zone will be back with RCR this year. It would have been disappointing to see a pretty good-looking car last year in 2025 in a solid-looking paint scheme, all things considered. I think it would have been really disappointing to see a good paint scheme not come back in the 2025 season. So great decision overall to bring that car back for 2025. We'll see what other sponsors Kyle Busch does have for 2025. I would also expect that Zone will likely sponsor Kyle Busch in this year's Clash, as they were on the fire suit for the weekend. The entry list has not been officially announced for this weekend's race at the Clash. I do expect that to come later today during the Rockingham test that's going on. But again, great to see the Zone is coming back. There's also a lot of concern whether Kyle Busch will be back with the team or not in 2025 or 26, I should say. Though I do think there's a solid chance and opportunity that Kyle Busch could make a comeback with RCR in 2026 if RCR does end up performing on a very solid and strong note in the 2025 season. But if RCR really struggles, I don't see him coming back with the program in 2026 and probably going back to Joe Gibbs Racing at this point. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about John Hunter Nemechek. Now, during NASCAR production days, Bob Pockrass interviewed John Hunter Nemechek about his plans for the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. John Hunter basically confirmed, and Bob Pockrass confirmed as well, that John Hunter Nemechek does not have any Xfinity Series starts scheduled in 2025. Last year in 2024, John Hunter made around 8 to 10 starts with Joe Gibbs Racing and picked up a couple victories last year at National Super Speedway and picked up a win early in the year at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. We do know there is going to be an all-star car for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025. We know Justin Bonzador has already been announced as the number 19 car for the team in 2025, but there have been some conversations about John Hunter Nemechek coming back over and running in the Xfinity Series in 2025. That will not be the case currently at the moment. So what this tells me is it seems like the Legacy Motor Club, which we're going to talk about them here in just a short little bit, it seems like Legacy will not be working with Joe Gibbs Racing at all in 2025, despite the fact that Legacy Motor Club probably needs a lot of help and support from Joe Gibbs Racing at this point after a struggling season in 2024. And I think it would make a lot of sense to get a technical alliance with that team in 2025. But at the same token, same time, I do understand why they decided to go ahead and not work with them, because they don't really have they have a solid working relationship at Toyota currently at the moment, but I feel like if they were working with Joe Gibbs Racing, I think they would be in a much more solid, in a better position. Again, I get and understand why they're not working with them, because they want to be their own thing, and I can respect that, honestly, but at the same token, same time, it would have made a lot of sense to go ahead and work a little bit closer with this team and program. So this tells me we don't officially know the other drivers behind the wheel of the number 19 for this year. We think Eric Almirola may make a comeback at some point. We could also see other drivers get behind the wheel of the car at some point this year. We'll just have to wait and see. I expect Denny Hamlin to run a couple races. Same with Christopher Bell. Same with Mark Truex Jr. We're going to talk about Ryan Truex, about his plans at this point. But I do think some other drivers are going to get announced here really, really soon for the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. But John Hunter Nemechek will not be one of those drivers who will get behind the wheel of the number 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2025 year and season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mike Wallace. Now, we have talked a lot about Mike Wallace on this channel over the course of the last couple of weeks. Let's get a little bit flashback. Mike Wallace originally on January 2nd announced he would be attempting to qualify for the 2025 Daytona 500. A couple days after my birthday, it was confirmed that Mike Wallace would basically be disqualified and disallowed from running the 2025 Daytona 500. Mike Wallace originally would respond very disappointing, but kind of understood the decision at the time. Then we basically had the open exemption policy come in very, very recently, and Mike Wallace was not very happy on social media. He tried to provide some evidence of him basically being approved by NASCAR. Well, in the evidence, it did not show that he had been officially approved to run the Daytona 500. And NASCAR, in their response today, basically said that Mike Wallace pretty much jumped the gun on making the official announcement that he would be running the Daytona 500. He was never approved by NASCAR, despite the fact that Steve Phelps basically telling him he was good to go. And there was a big miscommunication there. They did say, however, that Mike Wallace does have an opportunity to run the 2026 Daytona 500, then could have a roadmap to get back in 2026. But Mike did say in an interview recently, Matt Weaver, that he's not sure if he is going to take that opportunity. He's not angry about the decision anymore, but he's a little bit disappointed. As much as I understand why Mike Wallace is frustrated and upset with the situation, look, let's be real and honest. Mike Wallace is 65 years old. And two, Mike Wallace has not been active since 2020 in Xfinity competition when he ran 3 races for JD Motorsports. The last time he ran a cup race was 2015, 10 years ago. He was in his mid-50s at the time. Age has nothing to do with it. And there were people that were at the time were trying to discredit Helio Castroneves, who was trying to run the Daytona 500, who was going to make the Daytona 500, but Helio Castroneves has been active. And there's probably going to be some people in the comments saying, well, Casey Kane got approved to run the race at Rockingham, but Rockingham is different than Daytona International Speedway. And number 2, he's been active. Casey Kane's been running full-time in the High Limit Series and has been running part-time in the World of Outlaws this year. So that's why Mike Wallace didn't get approved and why drivers like Helio Castroneves and Casey Kane have been approved to run in the sport. Because they're, you guessed it, active. If Mike Wallace had been a lot more active and still been doing racing at this point, he would have definitely been approved to run the Daytona 500. I don't think age really had anything to do with it. Plus, no offense, but Chandler, in my opinion, is a better driver than Mike Wallace currently at the moment. So I do think that Mike Wallace, as much as I completely understand the frustration from his camp over there, and I get being upset about how things ended up happening, I do think that NASCAR made the right decision and right call. And I think that that's really all you can do at this point is make the right decision and right call and do the right things. And I think NASCAR did the right thing by not granting him the opportunity to run the Daytona 500. As much it would have been a pretty incredible story, especially since Ford is going to be supporting his entry in a major way this year. Mike Wallace, I just don't, especially with him being gone for as long as he's been, I think NASCAR made the right decision to go ahead and not approve him for this year's Daytona 500. I do think some things need to be talked about, maybe communication going forward down the road, but it feels like that Mike Wallace jumped the gun here, like his brother Kenny said, and especially since Mike is almost 66, I don't think he's going to ever race in NASCAR again at this point, and I feel like that the chance of him coming back to the sport are over after how everything got handled, but Mike Wallace kind of did it to himself and put him in that position that he put himself in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the open exemption policy. Now, going into this year, NASCAR added a new rule for the open exemption policy. This OPE rule, originally we all thought was only going to be going out to drivers that were world-class drivers that had not raced in NASCAR at all. This will go to Helio Castroneves for this year's Daytona 500. Had Helio Castroneves not qualified in on speed on the top 2 cars on Wednesday night in a couple weeks, or did not be one of the 2 highest finishing drivers in the duels, he would have basically be able to use the OPE, and it would be an extra car in the field. Originally, we thought that was just for world-class drivers. This seems to not be the case. According to what was reported today, Martin Truex Jr. and Jimmy Johnson are also eligible to run the open exemption policy. Meaning that drivers who have retired from full-time racing and are only running on a part-time basis that have elite-level talent like Martin Truex Jr. and Jimmy Johnson, who are both Hall of Famers and future Hall of Famers in NASCAR competition, they're also eligible to run it. So let's say if a guy like Kurt Busch or Carl Edwards ever wanted to go ahead and run the open extension policy, they'd probably be approved to run it, even though those guys have not been around at least in a couple of years at this point. I think the open extension policy, the more I've thought about it, the more I feel like it's a little bit unnecessary to have this. It kind of feels like a little bit of a begging thing from NASCAR. I get why they wanted to do it, and I don't think it's going to be something that is going to be commonly used throughout the next couple of years. I don't think you're going to see this as common. I think it's only going to be used for special circumstances, and mostly only during the Daytona 500, and it seems like multiple can be used in one race. It seems like actually one can only be used in the race, and you do still have to basically decide 90 days prior if you're going to make the decision to go ahead and do it, which I think that's a good decision NASCAR made on that front. I think the open exemption policy still has some kinking and some issues that it really has to kink out at this point, but I do think that some of the things that could come from it could lead to some drivers like a Max Verstappen, could lead to drivers coming out of retirement, like if Jeff Gordon ever want to come out of retirement, he definitely could, or if other drivers like Jimmy Johnson, like I said, who want to do it, they can, or if, like I said, Tony Stewart ever gets his frustration with NASCAR ever sorted out, he could be someone that could end up using this rule down the road. So the open exemption policy will come into play for this year's Daytona 500 only if Elio Castroneves doesn't qualify in on speed or time or doesn't make it for the duels. I think it's interesting for sure. There are going to be 9 cars that will be attempting to qualify for the 500, and we know for sure one that is officially confirmed, and I do think it's good to see at least we kind of know some of the new ruling for the open exemption policy in 2025. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Truex. As it was announced earlier this afternoon that Ryan Truex will drive the 24 car for Sam Hunt Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Daytona International Speedway. Ryan Truex, who was signed up as a reserve driver for Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of last year, had not officially announced his plans for the 2025 season until today. Ryan Truex is expected to make other starts with this program throughout 2025, not just only at Daytona International Speedway, but will run more races throughout the year, as it was revealed in the docket earlier today that he will get to have the opportunity to run more races throughout the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. I'm really glad that Ryan Truex is getting the opportunity to drive at Daytona International Speedway. Remember, going into this year's event at Daytona International Speedway in Xfinity Series competition, he is going in as the defending race winner. And Ryan Truex is a really, really good super speedway racer, has become a really good super speedway racer. Sam Hunt Racing has had solid speed on the super speedways over the course of the last couple of seasons. So I think Ryan Truex has a really good opportunity and really good potential. He drove for Sam Hunt Racing at Homestead Miami Speedway last year, and I think he did a very, very good job with this program in the race that he did get to end up running with this team. And in the few races he did run Xfinity competition, he picked up 2 victories. I wish Ryan Truex was full-time this year, and I do think he deserves to be full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. But again, it all comes down to that big green thing, that is money and sponsorship. And you got to have money and sponsorship if you're going to race in the sport and have the potential to get behind the wheel of a good car long-term. But I'm glad to see that at least a team like Sam Hunt Racing, who can see that Ryan Truex does have a lot of talent, I'm glad to see they're giving him the chance and opportunity. As for other drivers who I think could get behind the wheel, Connor Daly was rumored to be going full-time with this organization in 2025. That did not end up happening, as he is going to be focused full-time with Juncos Hollinger Racing. But could there be an opportunity for Connor down the road to get behind the wheel of this car this year? It is certainly possible. And I also wouldn't rule out the possibility of Corey Heim making starts. In fact, Corey Heim will probably get a majority of starts that this number 24 car does end up showing up. And I think that this car will have potential to show some really good pace and speed. I think Toyota is going to help this car in a pretty massive way in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. And again, it's another competitive car. The more competitive cars you can have on the racetrack, I think it's better for everybody. So all things considered, it's really great to see that this car will be coming back. There'll be 2 cars throughout a lot of this season, and it'll probably be more drivers in the Toyota camp announced. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of someone like a Tony Breidinger making her NASCAR Xfinity Series debut at some point with this team in 2025, and we'll see whatever drivers they do end up getting behind the wheel. But I think Ryan Truex does have a really solid chance and a very good opportunity to pick up his first win of the season with the team, and looks to pick up his 4th career NASCAR Xfinity Series win in the 2025 NASCAR season at Daytona International Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson. As it was announced earlier today that Jimmie Johnson has officially become the majority owner of Legacy Motor Club. Mara Gallagher, who has been majority owner of the team over the course of the last couple of years, will basically scale back his ownership stake in Legacy Motor Club. He will still be a part-time owner for the program in 2025, but will basically become a minority owner of the team for this year. It was also confirmed today as well that Knighthead will take a minority stake into the program as well. It will bring a lot of capital and money from the firm in 2025. This is the first time this year we have seen an equity firm come in and work with an organization in 2025, though we have seen equity firms starting to show up a lot more frequently. We think about Gamebridge with Spire Motorsports and how much money they are bringing in. You think about some of the other things like Mark Lasbury and the Avenue Sports Fund Group coming in and working with Trackhouse Racing. And then you have the Harris Blitzer Group working with Joe Gibbs Racing on a part-time stint in 2025. And now you've got Knighthead. Now, Knighthead, for those who do not know, they are a massive firm. They are a $14 billion company, and they own companies like Jota across the world, which has association with Tom Brady. There was rumors about Jimmy Johnson and Tom Brady teaming up to form a car with Chip Ganassi Racing, which I don't know if that's going to happen at this point, and Sebastian Bourdais being the driver for that car. I'm still a little bit skeptical if that is going to happen at this point right now, but I think that bringing a big company like Nighthead in, it does make a lot of sense in my opinion. And this money and this capital will be huge for Legacy Motor Club. It will mean they'll have more money to bring into the program, which means that a team is going to probably end up getting a lot better this year. Legacy Motor Club struggled immensely over the last couple years, and in 2024, it was a massive, disastrous year for the program. Legacy Motor Club failed to score more than 2 or 3 top 10s, or like 4 or 5 top 10s all season long. Eric Jones, who's usually been a guy who's been a borderline playoff contender the last couple of years, he struggled last year. He had that injury and only got 2 top 10s throughout the year, while John Nemechek was the last finishing full-time driver in the standings, and John Hunter just absolutely had no pace and speed in the second half of the year. There are even talks and conversations about John Hunter potentially losing his seat at Legacy Motor Club for this year and having someone like Corey Heim come in and take the ride for 2025. I think this program has an opportunity now to get better. And the fact they've got big money coming in to help the program, I think is really going to be huge for the team as time progresses and goes on. And I think it's good to see we've got a company wanting to help out a program get a lot better this year. I want to see Legacy get better. And I think Jimmy Johnson taking full majority ownership stake in the program also does make a lot of sense. I think Jimmy wants to help this program get better. I think he knows that Legacy just hasn't had the raw pace and speed. He has said being an owner of a program, he's realized it's a lot more difficult than he realized, which he probably should have known before getting into ownership stake with the program personally. But I do think Jimmy Johnson now realizing that he needs to kind of take a lot of ownership stake of the program does make a lot of sense. And it's good to see that a firm will get to work with Jimmy Johnson in the 2025 NASCAR year to bring a lot of the equity money that they're really desperately going to need in 2025. And I think this money will help them definitely get a lot better in the 2025 year. So we'll see what happens with Legacy Motor Club heading into 2025 and see if this team can actually truly end up showing a lot of improvement and showing some really great performance in the year. We'll see what happens with the team as we head into the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season with the money they bring in. Of course, Jimmy will be looking to probably bring the IMSA program down the road. And now with Nighthead coming in, they'll have some money to basically back that up going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR playoffs. As it was announced earlier today, that NASCAR will not be making any changes to the playoffs for 2025. NASCAR's reasoning behind not making any changes to the playoffs for 2025 is they don't want to make any small tweaks to the playoffs in 2025 and not make changes every single year like we're going to potentially make in 2025 and then make a massive change in 2026 and make the fans really frustrated and upset. Now, NASCAR did say they're still looking at potentially making major changes to the playoffs for the 2026 year, and they are going to be focused on that by having a group of individuals kind of figure out and stakeholders get involved as well on trying to make some potential changes for 2026. John Probst, who is the SVP of competition, I believe, he basically revealed there are 3 types of fans as well when it comes to the playoffs. Fans that love the playoffs, fans who hate the playoffs and want it to go away, and fans that are in the middle that like the playoffs and want to see, but do want to see some changes to it, but they don't know what changes that they want to make. Look, I made a video talking about this earlier today on the channel, and I was a little bit more frustrated than I am now about the situation. I kind of understand from NASCAR's perspective why they don't want to make any sort of small tweaks to the playoff format and then make a massive changes in 2026. I get that and understand. But NASCAR literally said they were having talks and conversations early in the offseason that yes, they were going to make changes to the playoff system. What change? Well, I think a big reason for that is because of NBC. NBC, they want playoffs. Proper example, IndyCar. There were talks about having a playoff format in IndyCar in 2025, had NBC still been around as the broadcaster for it. Guess what? IndyCar's not going to be with NBC this year, so I think that's a big reason why we still have the playoffs going into 2025, which I really don't understand from NBC's perspective why they're still continuing to have that and why they still want to keep the playoffs around in the current format that we've had. Because the ratings have dropped, for the championship race every single year. There's never been a true increase when it comes to TV ratings for the playoffs. So I really don't get that and understand that from their perspective on it. And as for the playoff format, I would have loved to see at least some small tweaks to it. Like maybe, I don't know, a limitation on the points of where you can be in the standings perhaps, on where you have to be, then not just let everybody in. No offense Harrison Burton last year, but Harrison Burton was 35th in the points all season long. All of a sudden he moves up to 16th because he gets a win at Daytona. The win in your in system and the fact that a guy can lock their way in who's been mediocre all year, that is a major, major problem. Something that a lot of fans want is they want to see major changes to this current system. A lot of fans like myself would love to go back to full season Winston Cup format, but I don't think that's going to happen, especially with NASCAR right now. So what's the simplest thing you can do? Go to a chase format. That'd be the simplest way you can do it. Have 10 races, have 12 drivers make the playoffs, and I think then you'd have 10 races to decide it. At that point, you have a little bit more of a fair system while also still probably have the entertainment side of things coming into play. I think that whatever changes they make in 2026, they have to be significant. You have to make massive changes and do something major because fans are not going to put up with this much longer going forward, in my opinion. I think there's already a lot of fans who are showing apathy and going after against the hardcore fans that don't like this system like myself. There's got to be changes. If they could just get rid of two things, when you're in a one-race championship, I'd be a lot happier individual. That's not difficult to do. You can still do the eliminations. Fine, we can still do that. If you're going to make any changes, I guess we have to wait a little bit. I just wish you're making some changes for 2026. I get they probably just want to wait a little bit to make some of the changes they really desperately do want to make. But personally, like I said, there should have been at least something done this year about some of the systems they had, especially after how bad the season ended, how frustrated fans were. Fans were debating. They were getting frustrated about it. And I understand a lot of this probably because Joey Logano won the championship. But to me, if you perform mediocre all year, you shouldn't be able to win a championship. And I really hope we do have some changes in 2026. But I do worry a little bit about that. They're not going to make the changes they want, which I think is a little bit disappointing. But I'm also not shocked to see NASCAR not make any changes to the format for this year, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Corey LaJoie. As it was announced early this morning that Corey LaJoie has officially revealed his 2025 NASCAR plans. Corey LaJoie is going to have a lot going on for 2025. Number one, Stacking Pennies will be making a comeback in 2025 on NASCAR's channel. Stacking Pennies has been around for a very, very long time with Corey LaJoie and, of course, with NASCAR as basically one of their properties. So LaJoie will be focused on Stacking Pennies throughout the year. He will also run part-time in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025 as he will drive the 0-1 car for Ware Racing as he will attempt to qualify for this year's Daytona 500. Not only that, he'll run around 5 to 10 NASCAR Cup Series races in the 2025 year. It was also confirmed and announced today as well that along with Daniel Trotta, he will be an analyst on Amazon Prime. He'll be doing the pre-race coverage for that, so she will be the pre-race host for events on Amazon Prime, while LaJoie will also be a pre-race host on the show as well. Quintessentially in the same position that Wally Dallenbach was in, where he basically wasn't the best driver out there, though Wally still won some big races throughout his racing career in Trans Am and also in IMSA competition as well. But Corey LaJoie, who's most recently behind the wheel, will get the opportunity to work with Amazon in 2025. Let's first talk about Prime. I think that's not a bad decision to be someone who's been there recently. He might actually end up being a really good not lead commentator, but I think he could honestly have the opportunity to do a really good job as an analyst at Prime. And he'll get to work with people like Adam Alexander, Dale Jr., and Steve Letarte. Steve Letarte has worked with Corey LaJoie, as of course Steve Letarte was basically the consultant, and is still, I believe, the consultant over at Spire Motorsports currently at the moment. And he's helping the team out in a pretty big way as that organization continues to grow in massive ways. As for Corey LaJoie's racing plans, look, we knew Corey LaJoie was not going to be full-time in NASCAR competition in 2025. There were rumors about him driving at least on a part-time basis with Ware Racing. There was also talk at one point about him going full-time in the number 19 truck for McAnally Hilgeman Racing. There was also talk maybe about him being part-time with Spire Motorsports in 2025. But inevitably, he decided to go ahead and drive for a part-time basis in Cup. Now, his explanation to Bob Pockrass earlier today, didn't really understand that explanation from him. He kind of said and was kind of dissing the NASCAR XFINITY drivers and the Truck Series drivers as well, which to me, not a big fan of that personally, I don't think dissing drivers in the lower series, some of them that have Hall of Fame careers like Justin Allgaier did, and his father, Randy LaJoie, is a two-time NASCAR Xfinity Series champion who could be down the road a future Hall of Famer, one of the 75 greatest drivers of all time, according to NASCAR. I didn't like seeing him diss the drivers in the lower series. Guys like Ron Hornaday, for crying out loud, are NASCAR Hall of Famers, and Ron was is, in my opinion, maybe the greatest truck driver we have probably ever seen, maybe outside of Kyle Busch. But that being said, I am glad to see LaJoie does have at least some sort of racing opportunity in 2025. As much as Corey LaJoie probably deserved to lose his seat full-time from Spire Motorsports after how bad he struggled in 2025, I don't think he deserved to be out of the sport completely. And I'm glad to see that a team is taking a chance on him in 2025. Now, he will attempt to qualify for this year's Daytona 500 in the 01 car. I do want to correct something from a video that I said. I originally said that Jason Luffler was the driver of 01 the last time the car was around. I was wrong. Mark Martin, Joe Nemechek was behind the wheel of the 01 car over the years. Jerry Nady was, and also, of course, the last time I think 01 car showed up was Regan Smith, who was behind the wheel of that car in 2008. So I'll correct myself on that. But I think LaJoie will have the opportunity. Look, Corey LaJoie is going to be with Rick Ware. They're going to get help probably from Roush Yates, and I think it's going to give Corey an opportunity, a chance. But the thing that's going to worry me for Corey LaJoie is the fact there's a lot of really good competition trying to qualify for this year's Daytona 500. Among the drivers, you have Elliott Castroneves in the 91 Project 91 entry. You've also, of course, got some other really good rides that are showing up. Jimmy John's 84 car for Legacy Motor Club. You've got the 40 car for Junior Motorsports with Justin Allgaier and Chris Stapleton partnership. You got Mark Truex Jr. in Tricon Garage, which they're going to have a chance and opportunities. They'll get help from Joe Gibbs Racing. You've also, of course, has some other big-time teams that are showing up. You've got Garage 66 with Chandler Smith. You've got Beer Motorsports and Anthony Alfredo. And you've also got Live Fast Motorsports and NY Racing showing up as well. LaJoie probably won't have the pace and speed to make it in on Wednesday, but I look at Thursday being the most likely opportunity and most likely chance where we do see that car end up making it. I think LaJoie has a really good opportunity here to make the field this year in this year's Daytona 500, and I look for this car to be fast and quick enough to be a major threat and contender to make the Daytona 500 in 2025. I think that he's got a good opportunity. I think the sponsorship with Duramax and I think Dryden as well, working with him, it does make a lot of sense. I think the car also does look really good, and I think that Rick Ware knocked the one out of the park. For his race plans, 5 to 10 races this year. That's how many he's going to run in 2025, along with doing his TV work also this year. We'll get to see what Corey LaJoie can truly do with the Rick Ware Racing team again. At the end of last year, he actually had some really strong and good performances with the Rick Ware Racing group. I think he does have a solid and decent opportunity to perform at a really decent note. We'll see what Corey LaJoie can do in the select races he has. If he does well enough, could he end up being full-time with Rick Ware? Is certainly possible, but with Cody Ware being the driver of the car full-time this year, we're probably not going to see him go full-time, at least for now. But I do think LaJoie will have a decent chance and opportunity to be competitive. We'll see what he can do with Rick Ware Racing, at least on a part-time stint, and see if he can actually make the Daytona 500 in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Front Row Motorsports. We did a video covering this on the channel earlier today, but they officially announced their 2025 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series driver lineup. So they, of course, are going to have 2 full-time trucks for the 2025 season, but we didn't know at the time until earlier today what drivers will be in which trucks for 2025. So Lane Riggs, who was in the 38 truck last year in 2024, will move over to the number 34 truck for Front Row Motorsports in 2025. While his crew chief will be Dylan Capella once again, who was his crew chief in 2024. Those two will once again work together in 2025. Well, Chandler Smith, who last year drove full-time for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR XFINITY Series in 2024, he will go full-time with Front Row this year in the number 38 truck. And John Leonard is going to be the crew chief for him in 2025. Let's first start off by talking about Lane Riggs. Lane Riggs, at the start of 2024, he really struggled. The 38 team had some really good runs and had a lot of promise, a lot of potential throughout 2024. But unfortunately, at the beginning of the year, they just had a lot of bad luck and they were never major factors and serious contenders to go to victory lane. However, in the second half of this year, the 34 car last year really started emerging and showing up. they had a lot of good pace speed, the 38 truck did. In the final 10 races of the year, there was like a 5 or 6 race stretch where he finished no worse than like 6th or 7th. And also, we saw that truck get 2 victories back-to-back at Milwaukee and Bristol Motor Speedway. So I think that Lane Riggs is going to be a major factor for the championship. And I think this 34 truck will be a major sleeper pick to win the title in the 2025 season. As for the 38 truck of Chandler Smith, look, I already mentioned it last year. Chandler Smith had a very impressive year in 2024. He was very consistent. I think the most consistent of any driver full-time in the 2024 year, where he was able to pick up 2 wins early in the season at Richmond and Phoenix, and never won a race again throughout the year, but he was super, super consistent, had like a 9th or 10th place average finish overall, and did not make the championship 4, but came very close to getting it done. Until a couple months ago, we weren't sure if he was going to even be full-time. There was talk about him going to Rich Cho's Racing, at least on a part-time basis, but then this opportunity came up front row. It was a really good opportunity for him. Now, he's going to be working with John Leonard this year. John Leonard is a veteran crew chief in NASCAR truck competition. He was the crew chief last year for Matt Mills throughout most of the season, and he did struggle a little bit with Matt Mills. He did work with Stuart Friesen a couple years ago. I think he was a crew chief when Stuart Friesen went to Victory Lane a few years ago and has been around the block for a very, very long time. Plus, at one point was a crew chief, I think, for Matt DiBenedetto in the NASCAR Cup Series, and I think maybe even Christopher Bell as well, along with Casey Kane, who is making his return to NASCAR Xfinity Series competition in 2025. I think Chandler Smith going into this year, he is going to be a legitimate championship contender. I still think Corey Heim is the favorite currently at the moment to win the championship this year, but I think Chandler Smith is going to be up there competing for this championship along with his teammate Lane Riggs. Overall, when you look at the truck lineup for the year, it's very similar to the Cup lineup. You've got 300 drivers in the Cup Series, Todd Gillen in the 34, Noah Gragson in the 4, and Zane Smith in the number 38 machine. You've got 3 really hungry drivers in that series going into this year. Meanwhile, you've got 2 really good young drivers who I think have a ton of potential, and there's a good chance of possibly, too, that at some point they're going to be in Cup competition, at least on a part-time stint this year. There's talk that Front Row is going to have a part-time entry in 2025, and we keep hearing that that car will show up potentially with Chandler Smith. There's talk about him entering the Daytona 500 this year, but that did, of course, not end up happening. So what are the expectations of Front Row in 2025? Realistically, I do actually think that these 2 drivers are going to perform at a very strong note in the 2025 season. I think that Chandler Smith will get around 3 to 4 wins this year, and I think he will make the championship 4. He's going to be working with a different crew chief, which will take some time for him to get used to working with that new crew chief, but I think he'll get 3 to 4 wins and likely make the championship 4 in the 2025 season. As of course for Lane Riggs, I expect him to get better. He had a really solid second half of the year, and like his teammate Chandler Smith, I do look for him to be a major threat in serious contender to win the championship as well. Because I think Dylan Capella, who's gotten better as a crew chief, very young as well, and has gotten a lot better as a crew chief over time, I think that both these drivers will be super, super competitive in 2025, and I look for Front Row to be super, super strong. Again, they're going to have great competition with guys like Corey Heim, Gio Ruggiero, Roger Carruth, Tony Breidinger this year, Caden Honeycutt, who I expect to be a massive threat for the title this season. Of course, you've got the ThorSport trucks, most likely Ty Majeski, Ben Rose coming back, maybe Connor Jones as well, it seems like, which is disappointing. You've got Roger Carruth with Spire, same with Andres Perez de Lora. You're going to have some solid competition that's coming down on a part-time stint. Kyle Busch, Sammy Smith, guys like that will probably be showing up. You've got the one tri-contract that's going to have Brent Cruz at some point this year, which I think Brent Cruz is going to do really good in his Select Truck Series starts in 2025. And you got some other really great drivers. And long-term, I think both drivers have great aspirations, and I do think they've got a chance and opportunities not too far down the road to make their move up to the NASCAR Cup Series, which I think would be really cool for both those guys if they do get the chance and opportunity in the next couple years to move up to NASCAR Cup competition. I think that's what's so exciting about this program is you've got such a solid lineup for the year, and I think things are looking up in the right direction for Front Row Motorsports headed into 2025. I think both are going to be championship contenders. They're very strong going into the year. We'll see what Front Row Motorsports can do in 2025, as I think they'll be looking to try to win the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series title and win as many races as possible in 2025. We'll see how Front Row can do later this year in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, and if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Link description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your expectations for Ware Motorsports in the Truck Series in 2025? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and what are your thoughts about all the other stories we talk about today on the channel, including LaJoie announcing his plans? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any major news that does break throughout the day, we'll discuss here live on the channel. If not, the next time it's going to be Wednesday. We will basically take a look at the entry list for the Cookout Clash. Thursday is going to be the race picks for the Cookout Clash, the first race picks video officially of 2025. I would also expect videos on people like Haley Dean, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Shane Van Gisbergen, Connor Zilch, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, 2011 front row, you name it, all that good stuff. Other big names, like I said, like Carson Quaffle. Expect all that content on the people like Daniel Suarez too, Matt DiBenedetto, Frankie Muniz, all that stuff, Clayton Martoon. Expect that all to be coming very soon on this channel. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.